Hey Dev Team, welcome back to Flutter with Drag. We're going to be looking at this app, creating this hopefully over the next week or so. I guess it's going to take, we'll see. Let's start, and this time we're starting from a completely blank canvas. I haven't even created the Flutter project. So let's get cracking. Flutter, create, give it a name. What should we call this one? I think we'll go with fitness tracker. Yeah, okay. Sort of fitness tracker. Good. Create that, and once that is done we can go into the folder and start coding from there. So let me just open that up, and we're good to go. So we're going to be using some fonts, and I was asked in a previous video if I would show the process of installing a font. Now I am going to show the process of installing the font, but in this particular case it's a little bit pointless because the font in this design is Roboto, and Roboto is the default font that Flutter's using anyway for Android, not for iOS. So doing this will ensure that there's a consistent look between the two. So we'll go through the process and get that done. So I'm going to create first of all a new folder which I'm just going to call fonts, and while I'm at it I'm also going to create a new folder which is going to be for our assets, because we're going to need to download a couple of assets as well, a couple of images. Okay, so let's head on over to our browser, and here I'm at fonts.google.com, and they have many fonts that you can search through. Luckily for us, Roboto is the top one here, so it's very easy to find. But if you can't find it, you can just search for it up here. Roboto, it'll find it, and we're using the standard Roboto. That gives us the page. Now we can download the font from here, and that's going to download for a zip file containing all the fonts. So I'm going to hit download. I'm going to store it into the fitness tracker, fonts, and save. We'll come back to that in a second. But what I do also want to do is make a note of these numbers and the type of font. So we've got thin 100, and there's also an italic version. We need to just bear that in mind. So we've got thin 100, a light 300, regular 400, medium 500, bold 700, black 900, and we have an italic version of all of those. And then other fonts may have different things, but it's important we have that because we're going to need that. Okay, if we now come to our Visual Studio Code, we can see that the Roboto is installed in there, and I'm just going to my desktop and I'm extracting all the files into there, and there they are. Okay, I can download or can delete now the zip file, get rid of roboto.zip, and we have those files there. So if we come down to our pubspec YAML and head all the way down to our fonts section, we can see there's an example already installed for us. Let's just select and uncomment the first example, and of course this is going to be Roboto, and it's going to be Roboto regular, and we're not going to be using the italic version, but as you can see below the example, we are going to be using the weight. Okay, so we already know we've got the regular, and regular is 400, and that's the default weight of a font. So we need to put the other ones in. So we have Roboto thin. Stick that in, and the weight for the thin was 100. Okay, and then we just need to copy that line and paste it in for the other variations. So we have light, which is 300. We have a regular, which is 400, and I'll leave that at the top so we don't have to deal with that one. We have medium, which is 500. We have bold, which is 700. And finally, we have the black, which is 900. So that's our font installed, and we can make use of these, and you'll see where these weights come in later on as we go through sessions. The other thing we want to do is make sure that we have some assets. We need to download a couple of pictures. Now, I have got these pictures from unsplash.com. That's www.unsplash.com. And if we head over to their website, you can search for and use images. If I look at my search history, you can see the sort of things I've been searching for. So, for example, we can go to profile picture and you can find a profile picture. And this is the one that I've chosen, and this is the one we're using as I did in the last project. So that's great. You just click on the arrow to download it, and we're going to save that to the assets folder. I also searched for Jim, I think it was, next, and have downloaded this picture I think I was using. So if you want to take a copy of that, but you can use any of these pictures, that's fine, you just choose what you like. And then the other picture that I got was Jim running. I tried to find somebody on a running machine, and it didn't quite work out as a running machine, but I've used this image. But again, you can use whatever you like. Those last two images I have resized, but that's all I've done to them. I've set them up to be a width of 600, and the profile image I just cropped down to a square. So if we come back to our VS Code, we can see we've got our profile image, which I've called profile.jpg. We've got a running image, and we've got a weights image. Oh, that's okay, that's the way around we've got it. Makes more sense that way. But you can choose the images you want. That doesn't matter. That's not important. Okay, so having those installed, we need to come now to our code, uncomment a couple of lines here, and instead of specifying each image individually, I'm just going to put our folder, the assets folder, and that means everything is going to be bundled into our asset, anything that's in the assets folder. Save that. Okay, and that's all I think we need to do with this file. So the next thing to do is to get into our lib and our main.dart file, and at this stage, before we make any changes, let's launch it and get our emulator running, because the first time we launch it, it's going to take a little bit of time. So we can go to run, and I'm going to start it at this stage without debugging, and let's have a look. We'll wait until our emulator is launched. Okay, there we go. Our app is up and running. The test button works. All is good. Let's crack on. So to start with, I'm going to basically delete everything in the lib main.dart folder except for the void main function. And we're starting with a blank canvas, which means we need to put back our stateless widget called my app. Okay, that is going to totally break our app, but there we go. We can fix all this. So we're not returning a container. Let's start returning the scaffold that we need, and that starts with a material app, which contains a lot of theming data, all to do around the material design specifications. That requires a number of things. Let's start with a title, and the title we're going to give it is Fitness Tracker. It's going to have a theme. We're going to be putting some theming data in there, but we haven't got anything yet. Can't spell theme. So we'll just put in a theme data widget, but we'll leave that blank for a moment. I also want to set the debug show checked banner to false. That will get rid of the debug banner on the top right hand side. So if we save that, all good, but no changes yet. And then we want to put in a home page, and that is going to be a scaffold, and it's going to not have an app bar. We're just going to put in a body, and the body is going to be a container. And now if we save that, we should have a white blank app all ready for us to go. Okay. Now if we take a look at our design, we can see that the message bar and the status bar at the top is not part of that. So we're going to have to code in, and we're going to do that from the very start, the ability to hide that and to get rid of that. So coming up to the void main, we're going to call a method first, which is widgets Flutter bindings dot ensure initialized, and then immediately after that we're going to call system Chrome, and we're going to need to import that from the packages Flutter services. We can do set enabled system UI mode and set system UI mode to be immersive, I think is the one we want. And now if we save that, and we're going to have to do a hot restart of our app by clicking this arrow, we should find that when the app launches, it hides the bottom bar and the top bar for us. So it's given us the full screen. Okay, now that's out of the way, we can start looking at our design. We're going to start with this page, and what we're going to do is essentially block it out. So looking at this design, we've got a few sections. We've got this header at the top. We've got a current programs section, a recent activities section, and a navigation bar at the bottom. So that's 4 different sections. Let's put those in. Now I'm going to create a different folder structure for each of the pages. So within our lib, I'm going to create a new folder called pages, and in that folder I'm going to create another new folder called home, because we're creating our home page first, and when we do our next page, the one with the graph on it, then we will be putting that within a different folder. This home page is also going to have a folder in it called widgets, and that's going to be all the widgets that are related to that home folder. So if we come to the home folder and create a new file, and we're going to call this home.dart, and in home.dart we're going to be creating a stateless widget, which we're going to call homepage. We're going to have to import our materials package. And if you're not familiar with VS Code we're using, I did that with a control dot. Let's do that again. Control dot, and then I chose the package I wanted to import. So stateless widget is included in all of these packages, but we're going to stick with the material. Okay, I'm going to save that. And then coming back to main, instead of returning a container here, we're going to return our home page, like so. Now, we've got this error message saying prefer const with constant constructors. We can do a quick fix, and I'm just going to click fix for this line, because this is going to be an issue throughout our development. And it bugs me a little bit. I don't know if it should or shouldn't, but during development sometimes things need to be constant, which tells the compiler they don't ever need to change once it's compiled. Sometimes they don't, and during development it's flip-flops between whether it needs to be constant and whether it's not. So during development I turn that off. Now you can turn it off for a line like we've just done there, but if we want to also turn it off for this line, we would have to add it again, and then our code fills up with these all over the place. The other thing we can do, again with control dot, is turn it off for this file, and that adds this at the top, which turns it off for the entire file. However, I want to turn it off for the whole development, all the files. So within our folder here, I'm going to come down to analysis options.yaml. That's it, not it. Analysis options.yaml, and under the linter rules, we can just paste that rule in and set that to false, which means it's going to ignore that rule while it's doing its linting for the whole thing. So we can take it out of there now, and I'm not going to get that error message. But once the app is finalized, we can come and comment it out or delete it out of here, or set that to true, and then just go back and make sure that anything that should be constant is constant. Okay, so we've got our home page. Let's check out our design again. We've got a header, we've got current programs, we've got recent activity. So let's create those as widgets. So within the widgets folder, I'm going to create a new file, which I'm going to call header.dart. I'm going to create another file called activity.dart. Another file called, oh, I missed the current programs, which I'm going to call current.dart. And then we've got this navigation, and that's not going to go in that folder structure, because if we look at our other page that we're going to be creating, we've got the same navigation below. So that's a generic app-wide navigation. So under the lib folder, I'm going to create a new folder called widgets, and that's for all the generic widgets that are going to be used throughout the app. And in there, I'm going to create a file called bottom navigation.dart. Okay, so those are our folders. Let's start at the top with header. So again, this is going to be a stateless widget, which I am going to call app header. I'm not sure if that's a good name for it, but I'm going to go with it for now. We can always rename it later. And we're going to import our material. And we're going to return a container. And for now, we're going to set the width of the container to double dot infinity, the height to 100, and a color to a random color. We'll go with blue, since it's sort of greeny blue. Back to our home page. Now, as you can see from our Photoshop document, we've got all four of these are in a column. And so instead of returning a container for our home page, we're going to return a column. Column takes children, and the first child is going to be the header, app header. Okay, now we've got another of these blue things here, and this is telling us that there's another type of const that it wants to do. Prefer constant literals to create immutables. What does that mean? Well, basically here, as it stands, this is never going to change. This is always going to be the same. So what it really wants us to do is tell it it's a constant. And that's true right now, but it won't be true by the time we finish the app. So again, I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it and paste that also into our analysis options YAML file, and also set that to false. I'm going to close that now because I know those are the only two that are going to cause me a problem. Okay, so there's our header showing up. Is it tall enough? Probably not. I'm not too worried about the size. I'm just trying to get some sort of block out done. Let's go with that. 200. Okay. So that's our header taken care of. The next one is our current programs. So again, we're going to have a stateless widget called current programs. Again, we're going to import our material. And again, we're going to have a container, which I could have copied, but the width is going to be double dot infinity. Height is going to be, it's about the same, isn't it? Let's make it a bit smaller, let's say 170. And the color is just a random color. I'm going to stick in yellow. I'm going to copy that container because we're going to need that for the other bits. Back in our home, we can now import that. Current programs. And that's that part blocked out. Okay. Now, the next part is the recent activity, and I'm going to ignore that for a second and come to the bottom navigation. So again, stateless widget, bottom navigation, we're going to call it. We're going to import our material, and I'm just going to paste this container in place that we've copied, change the color to something else, doesn't matter what color, green, and the height, it's a lot smaller, let's say 100, and save that. Come back to our home page and add in our bottom navigation. Save that. Is that the right size? Don't think so. I think that's probably a bit too tall. I'm just going to change that to 80. Doesn't really matter at this stage. Okay, so that's our bottom navigation done. We just need to worry about the current, so the recent activities one. So again, a stateless widget, which we're going to call recent activities. Import our material. Paste in the container, give this another color, again doesn't matter as long as it's not the same color as the surrounding things. We'll just go back with blue, and we're going to place that in between the current programs and the bottom navigation, and we're going to recent activities, and that's it. That's our layout sort of done. Now, there are a few issues here, quite a few. The first one being that we want this bottom navigation to always be at the bottom, and we don't know where the bottom always is. So if we come back to our recent activity, or looking at the whole design, the header, the current programs, they're sort of like a fixed height, I think. The navigation is a fixed height, but this recent activity can change. I think we can make that expand, and that's exactly the word we're looking for, expand. So within our activities.dart, on our container, we're going to refactor by hitting Control Dot. We're going to wrap with a widget, and we're going to wrap with the expand widget. We're then going to take the height out of there, and when we save that, you see that in our app, the emulator, that widget has expanded to take up as much room as it can. And that is brilliant, because it means we don't have to worry about the height of it. It will always expand, and that means it will always push the navigation bar to the bottom. Talking of which, on the navigation bar, let's have a look at how that's laid out and actually get that created, because we're going to need that to switch between some pages. So if we take a look at the navigation bar here at the bottom, we can see that it's essentially made up of a grey background with 5 icons over the top. The home one being slightly different, but it is an icon somewhere in the middle. And that's all in a row. So we can take care of that by coming back over to our bottom navigation. We can start to implement this a little bit more. So the first thing we're going to do is, it's not a green colour, it's a grey colour in the background, and it's a specific colour that I've taken. I've used the eyedropper tool in Photoshop to ensure I get the right colour, and I've got a hexadecimal value for that of F8, 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 and to put that into Flutter, what we do is we say colour, and then we can put in the hexadecimal value. But we need to tell it its hexadecimal value. We do that with 0x, and we also need to put in a alpha value where 00 is transparent hexadecimal number, all the way to FF, which is fully opaque. So we've got a fully opaque, and that's our hexadecimal code. If we save that, we've got the right colour. That also looks a bit big to me, so I am going to decrease that to 60. I think that probably looks a little bit better. Okay, next thing, we're going to put in a child, which is going to be a row, and the row is going to contain children, and it's going to contain 5 icons. And the first one, which I looked up, was add chart. And we'll just copy that 5 times. The next one is search, icons search. Then we have home. Then we have date range. And finally we have settings. Okay, let's save that, and there are our icons across the bottom. Okay, now the colour is wrong for those icons, and we could set that individually by adding the attribute colour and setting the colour, but we want to make life a little bit easier for ourselves. So what we're going to do is come up to the row, refactor by wrapping with a widget, and the widget we're going to wrap this with is icon theme. Icon theme takes data of type icon theme data, and there, as you can see, we can specify the color, and what the color we're going to go for is, and let's get rid of that, hexadecimal, fully opaque, AB, AD, B4, and we'll just stick a comma at the end there, and when we save that, all our icons change to the correct color. The next thing is we want it spread out across the row, and we want it sort of spread evenly. So since we've got a row, we can spread that across the main axis alignment. So the main axis of the row is the horizontal, it's the left to right. And we have main axis alignment, and we've got a few options, but we're going to go with space around, and that sets that up perfectly. And because we've got an odd number of icons, the home button is going to be in the middle always. And that's it. That's our menu done. Only thing now is the home button, because that is a little bit different. So first of all, we're going to have to put it into a circle. And there are a few different ways of doing this, but I've chosen to put this into a container. So we're going to come down to the home button, wrap that with a container, like so. Let's just put that onto another line. And what we're going to do is set a background color of this container. But the background color, if we look at our design, isn't a solid color, it's a gradient. And we can do that with a decoration. So instead of setting color on the container, we can put a decoration of type box decoration. And in there, we can set a gradient. And the gradient we're going to set is a linear gradient. And the colors we're going to put in, there are two colors, the start color and the end color, although you can have more if you want. And they are going to be, again, hexadecimal, fully opaque. And the first one is 92E2FF. And just copy that to the second row and change the hexadecimal value for the second one to 1EBDF8. And that gives us our background. But it's going the wrong direction. If you can see, the background is going from left to right. We want it to go from the top left to the bottom left. And we can do that easily enough under the gradient by putting in begin and saying where we want it to begin. And we want it to begin in the alignment top left, and that will flip that there, and then it'll automatically flow to the opposite side, which in this case is the bottom right. Okay, next of all, the button is round, but again we've got a box decoration, so that makes this very simple because we can set a shape within the box decoration, and we can set that to a box shape circle. And that's that. Now all we need is to make it a bit bigger, and the simplest way, we could set a size, but because we also want to have a padding and to ensure that the button is centered, we can just put a padding which is going to be const. This is where the const word is required, and we can do edge inset all 13. And the reason why the const is required there, required is a strong word, but it's not required, it's advised, is because this padding is going to be the same always. It's not dynamic, it's not going to change. And so what we're saying is when the compiler compiles all this and it does all the calculations and whatever it does to work out the padding, it can take the value that it compiles, the compiler works out, and put it there. So that calculation doesn't have to be done at runtime, it's done at compile time. Okay, let's save that, and that's looking good. Now the button is white, so let's just come and set the color of that one button to colors.white, colors.white. Okay, and that is as our design, except for the fact our design shows it raised a little bit higher up. Well, if we come to the container, which has our button in it, and we wrap that with a widget, we can simply put in the transform widget. And there's different ways you can transform things, but we're going to translate it, which means effectively move it. And that requires an offset. And an offset takes an X and a Y value. Well, we don't want to move it on the X being left to right, so we put 0. And on the Y value, we want it to go up. So we want it to go, it's a negative to go up. And let's try 15. Save that, and that does that. Okay, that's perfect. The only thing that's missing, just looking at our design, is I think there's a sort of shadow underneath the button. So we can put that in under our linear gradient. We can also put within the decoration box shadow. And a box shadow takes a number. If we hover over that, we can see that it takes a list. So you can put a number of box shadows on it. We only have one, but it still has to go into the list. And we're going to put a box shadow, and we need to set a color. So colors.black. And just saving that, you'll see there's no change, although you might just see a little tiny black outline around the home button in the emulator. So we need to again move the shadow, so we offset it just like we've done above, and this time we want to move 3 pixels to the right and 3 down, and that does that for us. And then we put on a blur radius to make it look more like a shadow, but that's too harsh, so we can change the color of that. And there's, if we are typing in black, you can see there's a number of different blacks, and I think we're going to go with 12. And as you can see, it says a variance with different opacities, so we could set our own opacity, but I think 12 will work for us. And that gives us our bottom navigation. That is complete. Okay, time to flip over and work on our second page. This we're going to call our details page, and we can split this up as we did previously. So looking at this, we have this activities section, which is actually going to be an app bar, so we're going to handle that differently. We're going to have a dates section, a steps section, a graph section, an info section, and a stats section. We need a navigation bar. Well, we've already done that, so that's okay. And there's a little divider bar in there as well, but that we can take care of easily. I'm not going to create a special widget for that. It already exists. So flipping over to our code, under our pages folder, I'm going to right click, create a new folder, and this one's going to be called details, because this is going to be our details page. And again, right clicking on details, new folder, widgets, because we're going to put our widgets there. Let's start with the details folder. Again, right clicking and new file this time, and we're going to create a file called details.dart. Now, this is going to be like our home page, and I am going to make a change to what we've done so far. If we just flip back to our home page, you can see that we're returning a column. Well, I want to change that to return a scaffold. So let's hit our refactor, Control Dot, wrap with a widget, and the widget is going to be a scaffold. And a scaffold has a body, not a child, so we just change child to body, and that will put a scaffold around that page. I'm going to close that down now, don't need that, and come to our main.dart, where currently we have a scaffold and then the home page. Well, I'm going to change the home. I'm going to delete the whole scaffold there and just put in home page, because the home page is now contained within the scaffold. That'll make things a little bit simpler later on. So coming back to our details.dart, let's create this page, and this is going to be a stateless widget, which we're going to call details page. And we need to import our material. And instead of returning a container, we're going to return a scaffold, just like the home page. And the body of that, for now, is just going to be a blank container. Save that. Come back to our main page, and it's replace home page with details.page and import it. And now we've got a little underline saying that the home page isn't used, but that's okay. We're going to ignore that for now. And when we save, as you can see, our emulator goes back to a blank page and we're ready to start again. So I'm going to close down all the files except for details.dart. And we're going to take one of our widgets. It doesn't really matter which one, except it needs to, well, it does matter which one. One of our widgets, if you remember, the activity has gotten expanded. So any of the other widgets, either the current or the header, we're going to copy that. I'm doing it this way just to demonstrate that you can do and create widgets in many, many different ways. So we're going to come up to our widgets under our details page. We're going to right click and paste. And we're going to paste in a widget for each of the sections. So the activity I said we're going to handle separately. So that's going to be the first one we've pasted in is going to be for the dates. Right click again and paste. That's going to be for the steps. Right click and paste for the graph area. Right click and paste for the info area. And right click and paste for the stats area. So we have a load of widgets now, all with the same name, or at least VS Code has renamed it for us. But we can come through and rename them ourselves. So the first one, we're just going to select it, the header, hit F2, which is rename, and we're going to change that to dates. Within that file, we're going to double click on our app header to make sure it's all selected, hit F2 and change that also to dates, and that will refactor that all to dates. Save. Then we can pick, doesn't really matter, any of the other ones called header, copy, whatever. F2 to rename it, and we're going to call this steps. In that file, double click header, F2 there, and also rename that to steps. And we'll save that. Again, pick any of our renamed headers here, the header copies, F2, and we'll call this graph. This is for our graph section. And again, select it, F2, graph, save that. One of our last two now, we're going to hit F2 and call this one info and rename that to info. And then our final header.copy, F2, and rename that to stats. Double click F2 stats. Okay, so that's all renamed. And now if we come back to our details page, instead of the container, we're going to change this again to column as we had previously. And in that column, we've got our children, and we just need to put them all in. So we have dates, and you need to make sure that when you select them, auto import is, you choose auto import to import it in. If you don't, like this one, so if we type it in and put steps, it doesn't recognize it. You can come over, hover over it, control dot, and then choose import library. So we've got our steps, then we have our graph, then we have our info. Again, I missed it that time. Let's just import it. And then we have our stats. Okay, so those are all our widgets imported. If we hit save, we'll just get a block of color. And the reason we get a block of color is because it's all the same thing. It's all got the same color in it. And this hashed, or this chevron bit at the bottom means we've got an overflow. And again, the reason we've got an overflow is because all of our widgets currently have a height of 200. And if we add them all up, then all those 200s are greater than the size of our screen. That's not a problem. Let's fix this from the top down. So first of all, we'll pick our dates, and I'm going to set that to about, let's say 90, and just pick any color. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go with green, and that's okay for our dates. I'm going to close that. The next one is our steps, and that looks a little bit smaller, so I'm going to go with 70 for that, and we'll choose yellow, and we'll save that and close it. The next one is our graph, which I'm just going to ignore for a second, and then I'm going to work on our info, and that I'm going to say is about 50. And again, we can pick any color that's not next to it, so I'm going to pick green. Okay. And then finally our stats section at the bottom, let's pick 170. That's quite big, and we'll make that yellow as well. That's fantastic. Then coming back to our details page, we need to also put in our bottom navigation. Now we've already created that, so we just need to add it in, and that puts the navigation there. And like in the previous page where we had this area that expanded, well, that's going to be the graph in our case. So we're going to come back to our graph page and just wrap this container with the expanded widget, and that will expand and push everything down. And that is our layout ready to go. Excellent. So we've got our 2 pages now created. Let's wire them up so that we can navigate between them. So let's head over to our main.dart page, and what we need to do here is put in some routing, and the way we do that is under the debug show checked banner false. We're going to have to put in our routes. Now routes are a map of things, and essentially we've got the name of the route, and the first route we're going to put is a slash, which is also a default name for your initial page. You don't have to put it in, but if you do, that will be your initial page. And then we feed into that the page we want with a context. So that takes a function essentially. In fact, if we hover over routes, it tells you, takes over the string, which is the name, and then a widget, which is a function builder, and which builds our page. The second page we're going to call details. Again, the name is entirely up to you. That also takes context and the page name. Okay. Then to be explicit, we're going to put in the initial route of our slash, And when we do that, we have to take out this home. You can't have home and initial root. Now, when we save that, and we will do a refresh here, a restart, because it needs to take all of this in, we're back to our home page. Okay. So we need a button to get us to our other page. Well, I'm just going to choose from our bottom navigation bar, I'm just going to choose this settings icon at the bottom. So in our bottom navigation bar, we're going to refactor that and click wrap with widget. And the widget is going to be a gesture detector. And the gesture detector takes an on tap, which is the function that will happen when you tap the button. And what is it we need to do when we tap the button? Well, we're going to call the navigator of context. And we're going to spell navigator correctly. Navigator of context. We're going to push named. Okay, so we're going to push a named root, and the root we're going to push is the details. Let's save that. Now in our emulator, when we click the settings button, the page changes and we're at the details page. Now to go back, we need to click the home button. So again, right up here on our transform translate, in fact not in there, the container, we're going to come down to the container that's in the transform translate, wrap that with a widget, gesture detector, and again on tap we are going to call here navigator of context, and we're going to put push replacement named, and it's our home page. Now this is only a temporary thing. We shouldn't be using this quite in production. We should make things a little bit more sensible. But for now, this will work and allow us to click our cogwheel to get to our details page and our home button, so we can get between the two things nice and simply. And that's it. We're now in a place where we can go forward with our development and start creating these boxes and start making our app work. And we shall do that beginning in the next episode. So folks, if you've enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. That does help me out. I appreciate that. And hit the notification button to be notified when the next episode comes. And we'll see you then. Until then, take care folks. Bye for now.